All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our August membership meeting. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We have a pretty packed agenda of lots of good stuff to talk about. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Craig Douglas. I will be sort of co-hosting the session today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping rules as we typically do. We are recording today's session, so we'll be we'll be sending that recording out with any materials after the meeting today. If anybody gets bumped off or anything and you need a link to see any of the recording before we release all of the follow-up materials, just send a message to information@provideralliance.org and we'll make sure we get that to you as soon as possible. We are going to be using the chat feature today, so we'll be posting some materials in the chat, so feel free to keep an eye on that. We'll make sure that that is enabled for anybody to comment or communicate to everyone. We'll also be using the question and answer feature, so if you have a question, feel free to type a question in, or you can raise your hand and we'll certainly unmute you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick to kind of get us started.
Thank you very much, Craig. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here for our monthly membership meeting. This is a back to school edition. So as everybody gets prepared to go back to school, parents, grandparents, students out there. So we do have a packed agenda. We'll have a couple of guests that we'll walk through some items on. We are going to break up the agenda a little bit this morning. So if you're following along the agenda, we're going to cover a couple of TPA updates. We're expecting Jeremy Yale to join us shortly to discuss some of the things that we talked about on the agenda. With respect to tech, a little bit of follow-up from our conference last month. And Jeremy's going to come and talk to us about the technology accelerator that ODP has been promoting and advancing for quite a while now. I think that's really close to implementation. So we had a technology committee meeting yesterday that Craig hosted with several of our members. So we want to address that, do some follow-up on the conference, but we'll just cover a couple of things here in advance of bringing Jeremy in for that discussion. So next slide, Craig. I want to just talk a little bit about the conference briefly. So hopefully you were able to join us last month on the 28th of July, but we had a great in-person conference. We're interested in your feedback, of course. For the remote viewers, we know we have some things that we want to work on and improve next year. We're likewise very interested in feedback there. So we'll probably deliver this in the future if we do it hybrid, which is always going to be our intent, to do it more of a streaming so that you can view it. And we know there were some technical glitches on video, but by and large, we hope you were able to participate remotely and hear the conversation. I thought we had some great content. I'm very grateful to all the people who supported the conference, both by attending, either remotely or in person, and all the great panelists we were able to assemble for that day. So Craig, I also want to give a shout out to you. I thought really the look, the visuals, there's one of them up now, but there were just so many more visual aspects. And I thought the tone in the presentation, and again, we had a lot of sponsors, we had exhibitors there. So we're just very proud we were able to put this together for everybody. And so Craig, I know we kind of went with a splash of color this year, so it worked. I think it played well in retrospect. So anything you want to say, I do want to thank you publicly here because you were a great contributor to this conference in terms of all the things that go on in the background that many of you know have to be done. So I just want to thank you publicly for that. But what were your takeaways, Craig?
I appreciate that. I also want to extend my thanks to everybody who attended the conference. I thought it was a really educational session to help us sort of see the world from a different perspective. Oftentimes we get sort of mired in sort of the day-to-day details of what's going on, and it was great to kind of pop up a little bit out of that and look at how we can see healthcare for the people we support different, how we can look at technology different. It was a good day, I think, all around, and I appreciate everybody's attendance, and thank you, Patrick, for the compliments. I thought the color was great for us to launch from Common Ground. So yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, it was. Thank you again, Craig. And I think that if you kind of reflect back on last month and follow the theme, we're going to kind of cover it briefly, but really advance from there and maybe do things in a little bit reverse order. So, the afternoon sessions, we did integrated care solutions and we did technology and innovation. So we do have Marion Tresky with us today. who's very involved in a pilot involving UPMC Health Plan in Allegheny County that addresses a lot of information sharing in IDD services. And on that particular panel that day, we had Kristen, Dr. Chirpus, we had John Lovelace, Matt Mucci from UPMC, we had Scott Bachik from the BI Collaborative. That session was facilitated by Nick Vizaka from Center for Healthcare Solutions. So we had a lot of great ideas come together. And from that, because of this relationship with Allegheny County and UPMC, we wanted to host sort of a follow-up meeting and get together and get caught up. So we'll do a little bit of that today with Marion, who's really been involved in that for many years now. So, likewise, when we talk tech, we'll circle back to Jeremy. We had Jeremy, Lauren, Greg Wellams, Brian Hart from Lab. We had a great group of panelists there that really discussed a lot of things about technology and innovation and advancing that. And of course, a lot of what Jeremy and ODP are trying to support through the technology task force as well. So before we kind of get to those things, we'll kind of finish out the top half of the TPA update. So maybe Craig, we can kind of go next slide, talk about some of the upcoming events, and then we'll get into the rest of the agenda and updates.
Yeah, so as you all know, we have our strategic partnership with the Center for Healthcare Solutions, and they are hosting their annual conference Thursday, November 2nd from 9 to 3 at the David Lawrence Convention Center. The theme of that conference is Make the Change, What's Your Resolution? Couple of important announcements on that. So registration is open for that. We're going to have some more details about how TPA members can register for that event in the coming couple of days or week. But we do want to announce the keynote. So if you haven't already seen, Tom Farley is going to be joining as the keynote speaker. He is the brother of Chris Farley. Those of you who may be a fan favorite of an iconic film called Tommy Boy, that's Tom Farley is Chris Farley's brother. He has a lot to talk about in terms of family dynamics, addiction, and the concepts of recovery. So it's going to be a really interesting day to sort of learn about how, how we can look at healthcare different and how specifically for behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment, how that fits into the overall continuum of care. So I'm really excited about that. Hope everybody can join us for that day. It's going to be a really fun day. There's going to be a lot of great speakers and workshops throughout the day, and I'm hopeful we'll have some opportunities to shine to provide some IDA workshops as well during that session. So.
Hey, Craig, I'll jump in too and just remind everybody, if you're getting messages and meeting notices from the Center for Healthcare Solutions, that's pretty intentional on our part. So you're probably aware that July 1st, we entered into a strategic alliance with Center for Healthcare Solutions. They've been pretty prominent in a partnership with us for a while, but we now have access and exposure to all of their business partners. So I think there's a frictionless mental health, but that might even be happening today at the RLA. There's a lot of in-person events, there's a lot of remote events. So when you get those, those are open to you to register for. And again, the mental health issues, the conference will have a focus on that. TPA will have the opportunity to put together at least a couple of sessions for our members, very specific to IDD, and Center for Healthcare Solutions, very involved in supporting support community healthcare in general, and that's why we're really pleased about the partnership and things that we're able to offer as well. So I know one of the upcoming things we're going to talk about is exactly that. So I'll throw it back to you, Craig.
So we do have another opportunity for everybody. We're going to be doing, for those of you who were at the conference, part of our strategic partnership is working with ShareSource. They are a group purchasing organization that we're anticipating could create up to 30% savings for all of our members. So on September 5th, we're going to host 2 sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. We're going to have people from ShareSource available during those virtual sessions. For anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more and getting your information, it is totally free to sign up and sort of figure out how this will work for your organization. This will be an opportunity for you to do that. So, so keep an eye out for some information on the GPO sessions coming up in early September. And again, if anybody has any questions about that, you can send a message to either Patrick or I, or information@provideralliance.org, and we can certainly put you in touch with our colleagues at Center for Healthcare Solutions to connect you directly to ShareSource.
Craig, I'll just add on top of that, they have really talked about up to 30% savings. This is something we've been wanting to get off the ground for a few years and kind of tried to do it on our own. We had a partnership agreement with an entity locally. They were purchased by a larger GPO. That never materialized into anything that benefited TPA members. So this is ready to launch. This is already being used by Center for Healthcare Solutions. Their partners are eager to sign you up, help educate you on the benefits. So when the announcement goes out for this, these couple of sessions, you'll have the opportunity, kind of encourage you to get whoever really is responsible for purchasing in your organization. It'll go beyond strictly purchasing. Both Center for Healthcare Solutions and ShareSource are interested in cultivating partnerships for our particular needs as well. So they're used to dealing on a larger scale with hospital systems and large organizations and facility-based care. But they do have some things immediately out of the gate that will be helpful to our members, and they're willing to develop more contracts that could be helpful for us. So there's already going to be plenty of things that you're going to be able to benefit from. They promote that it's up to 30% savings. So in the environment we're in, we encourage you to take advantage of that, at least come to the session, learn a bit more about it. They've also promised us that they'll really facilitate the onboarding. So there should not be a lot of work on your part to get enrolled. They want more members. They want more volume in general, because that helps them negotiate better contracts. So this is a good opportunity for everybody all the way around. So we will very soon, because the date is coming up very soon. We worked all those details out yesterday to make sure those were good dates for ShareSource, good dates on our calendar that didn't conflict with anything. So that'll be upcoming here very soon. So Craig, we can go next slide and talk a little bit about the upcoming conference here. So as you can see, in Pittsburgh, the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals is hosting its annual conference in Pittsburgh Station Square, September 8th to 10th. I think most of everything happens sort of on the 8th and 9th. Encourage you to be involved. TPA will certainly be involved, have a presence there. On our agenda, we have some things we're going to talk about as far as collaboration with our colleagues at the other associations. One of the things we just did yesterday was write a letter of support to Governor Shapiro. Joe Macbeth at NADSP had invited Governor Shapiro to speak at this conference, and we wanted to provide some support to that invitation. So TPA and all of our colleagues across the associations and PEA did put a letter together and send that to the governor's office yesterday as well. So we look forward to having Joe Macbeth, NADSP, a lot of DSPs, a lot of support, of course, we want to give and learn what NADSP is doing. Of course, as you know, many organizations use eBadge Academy for credentialing. Credentialing is a big part of something that we'll talk about later in today's meeting with respect to selective contracting. So a lot happening. Glad to see NADSP coming to Pennsylvania. We'll enjoy having them in Pittsburgh. We encourage you to sort of spread the word on the conference. It's available on their website. If we're able to post something in the chat that's helpful to you to get connected and linked there. Craig, I'll see if we can maybe do that at some point during the meeting here. So I think that's kind of where we are. Craig, I'll throw it back to you, because I know we talked about yesterday's announcement, Tech for All. You hosted Technology Committee yesterday. So as we kind of segue into our next segment here, I'll throw it back to you, Craig, for some comments.
Okay, so you're going to hear my dog barking a little in the background. But yeah, thanks, Patrick. We did have our TPA technology meeting yesterday. And just to debrief, we had our technology task force on July 13th. Our focus is on marketing and adoption and ways that we can look at funding for technology in different ways. What we learned in the task force, as we discussed sort of the results of the survey, is that there still continues to be some confusion around what's the difference between remote supports and assistive technology, how it works for a provider versus an individual in their home. Many of you are aware that the department has issued some waiver amendments over the last couple of months last year or so. And in each of those amendments, there has been some tweaking and adjustment to that. So I think there's we continue on this journey to create some clarity around how technology can be supportive in services. And we're learning a lot from both our members and from the participants in the task force about ways that we can kind of work with ODP to help create some clarity, thinking about technology on a continuum, for example, how somebody can use sort of off-the-shelf devices like Amazon devices, all the way through some of our partnerships with like Safe and Home and Simply Home as solutions. So I think it's a journey like anything else. We're continuing to learn and adopt new ways of engaging persons served in how they learn about technology, how we evaluate their goals and develop solutions that might be helpful for them for promoting independence and health and safety and helping them live an everyday life just like you and I do. So Jeremy and Julie have both been instrumental in all of these groups with us. They've been able to provide lots of clarity as we've sort of worked through understanding some of these amendments to the waivers and some of the programs that are being developed with ODP. So with that, I see Jeremy is on, so I will, we're really excited to have him join us today to talk a little bit about the Technology Accelerator and some of the work that's going on there. And so Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Craig. Good morning, everyone. Patrick, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Jeremy. Really appreciate it. I know you have a busy morning, so I appreciate you carving out some time to chat with us today. And just to sort of lay the groundwork, what Craig just said, you and I have talked a lot recently. We thank you again for being with us last month at our conference. We thought we had some great conversations, including technology and innovation. We reflected on that a little bit earlier as we kicked off the meeting today. So, bringing you back to talk a little bit about the accelerator, anything you want to reflect on. But of course, we spoke about these couple of topics here, so they're on screen for you to see as well. But kind of wanted to just let you catch us up, certainly on the accelerator, which we talked a lot about. But anything you want to have conversation about, we'd love to hear from you of anything that's changed or happened over the last month.
Sure. Well, again, I really appreciate all of the work that TPA continues to contribute in this space. Patrick, you and Craig continue to drive this topic with your membership, and I think we are seeing the results of that at this point. Craig, I completely agree with you. This really is a journey. It is a space that is always evolving, and we need to stay open and continue to learn from each other. We have a national consortium of states that focuses in on technology first and remote supports and assistive tech, and just learn something new every time I'm with my colleagues from across the nation. So a few things as is noted here. Wanted to bring this group up to speed with the Technology Accelerator. From my seat, it has really been fairly anticlimactic. This was a proposal that we had, we being the Office of Developmental Programs and the Office of Long-Term Living, had put together pretty early on in the American Rescue Plan Act opportunity. So when those funds came in, both offices very, very quickly and clearly identified the ongoing development of supportive technology as a priority. And as we put that plan together and it was approved, we found that executing it was a little bit more challenging. So we think we may be within like a 3-month window of implementation. We are still working internally through procurement and through the Department of General Services and through the Office of General Counsel, just to give you a little bit of insight into the process. But again, the deliverables related to this work are going to be something that the provider community, I think, really can benefit from. As with your membership, as with anything in life, right? We have our early adopters, and then we have the folks that kind of come behind. There's plenty of your membership that have started blazing this trail, right? Like learn from their mistakes and kind of try to pick up where they are. We are in the process with the Technology Accelerator of developing some additional resources for providers and for the field at large. But a few of the primary thrusts of this work will be around developing training and a variety of different training resources around supportive technology. I see that Marian Trusky is on this call today. She has been connected very directly with the Tech Task Force and has really done a nice job organizing and executing and delivering a variety of different trainings under the moniker of Roadshow. So we think we can continue to support those efforts and continue to share examples of how people are using technology to live in everyday life. So pretty exciting with that. The other piece that we're interested in is developing an evaluation tool and a variety of different materials for providers that really explain the application of technology. So, if you are at that point of considering becoming an assistive technology provider or are interested in getting into remote supports, right? It could be a tool that would help agencies really assess where they are, determine what additional maybe policies or practices or resources or knowledge that they would need to incorporate. The other thing that we want to do, and again, it has been evident by some of the work that we've done through the Tech Task Force and with the marketing and partnership work group that Patrick spearheads, really relates around the lack of data that we have in this space. So, with some of the changes, recent changes to waiver amendments, we think that we'll be able, through claims data, to get a better sense of how broadly supportive technology is being utilized by service recipients. But we're interested in doing more of a statewide supportive technology assessment. Where are we now? What will it take for us to really push into a more mainstream technology first approach? So looking forward to getting some resources in that space. We also want to potentially leverage this opportunity with the Technology Accelerator to look across our two offices, the Office of Developmental Programs, again, and OLTL, or Office of Long-Term Living, and see where we can build some policy and practice together. Too often, government is criticized as really functioning in silos. We think that there's a lot of synergy and energy with technology, supportive technology, and we want to be able to grow those systems together, kind of across those two programs. We also want to support the county behavioral health, intellectual disability, developmental disability, autism offices, as well as the community health choices programs to really help with the acceleration of the proliferation of this. Jokingly, it's not really funny to me, but we've been referring to this program as of late as the Technology Decelerator, just because it has been well over 18 months and us trying to get this approved and out there to where it really needs to be. But I think we're pretty close.
Hey, thanks, Jeremy. What are you learning from other states, if anything, that you can share in terms of are you seeing traction in other states through how they're doing their waivers, things that are maybe more successful?
Yeah, good question, Patrick. So a lot of the work that other states are doing is really learning from each other. When we sit down with right, like Minnesota and Tennessee and Ohio and Arizona and New Mexico and some of the other California, some of the other programs that are trying to get organized around this, we find that our benefit package in Pennsylvania is, I don't want to say second to none, but it is very rich. It is pretty comprehensive in terms of what can be covered through the lens of supportive technology. So a lot of the learning has been identifying different vendors and some of the emerging technology that is coming forward, and figuring out how to bring that information into our collective states. One of the things that Pennsylvania had a challenge with, and to a large degree, I think we still do, is the amount of supportive technology agencies that are qualified to provide those services. We've been at a bit of a bottleneck with that, which again is okay. It does take some time, but we're seeing some other organizations. LumaCare was just approved to provide assistive technology in Pennsylvania. We know that there are several other agencies that are looking to come in and become qualified. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely. So just one quick follow-up, and maybe I know you've got to run whenever you've got to go, Jeremy. Appreciate your time today. So maybe I should invite Marion in. She's here to talk about really another topic that we also discussed last month at the conference on integrated care solutions and some work they're doing with UPMC. But as you noted, and as I'm well aware, Marion is also a co-chair on the Tech Task Force of her own committee. And so I want to introduce you. And also you mentioned Tennessee. My question really in follow-up, in terms of what you're seeing when you compare with other states, is there a consistency in terminology, remote supports, enabling technologies, assistive tech? Is that come sort of collaboration, or is CMS driving any of that?
I don't think that CMS has really taken much ownership or leadership in this space. I think they're largely playing catch up since COVID-19. And I say that with all due respect. States and the federal government are, at least 3 or 4 times removed from where this is actually happening. When you are actually sitting at a table with a person that needs these supports and services, and really kind of hammering out what that person-centered plan looks like, we're very many steps removed from that. But again, back to what Greg had said earlier, right? That the importance of a system learning together as we go, and which is, again, it just speaks to how critical it is when we're opening up changes to the waiver and opening that up for public comment. Just how critically important it is for us to hear your feedback on that.
No, and I take that as a positive. I think we would much rather work with you and have a dialogue about what can work and give our members and families providing services and individuals and self-advocates what's going to work for us. So I was struck by some of the recent conversation, the tech for all, the movement, people can speak for themselves as far as what tech they want to take advantage of. And I think, we'll learn a lot more from that than sort of having directives come down as to how we need to implement technology in home and community-based services. So Marion, while we still have Jeremy, I want to give you a chance to sort of weigh in on that aspect. I know I'm not really catching you off guard because you're having these conversations all the time. So is there anything you'd like to weigh in on or respond to?
No, I would just, I can definitely co-sign from my perspective, learning together is the way to go. I think myself and the partners that I have on our task force work group are very excited about all the opportunities that people would have in using technology, implementing technology. But it does require educating ourselves. It does require showing each other what we're doing, giving examples. And I think that's definitely our task with the roadshow concept. There's 4 roadshow recordings that we did earlier last fiscal year, and they're posted on the technology page on my ODP. So I would encourage folks, if you have a little bit of time, to go check those out. They're 4 one-hour sessions, and they have varying topics. And so our task for this next year is we're going to try to bring that to people in person. So we're looking to do some in-person roadshows.
Yeah. All right, that sounds great. And Craig, I think you looked at Tennessee recently. I don't know if you have anything there, just because I happen to know we had a conversation about it. If there's, I know there were some things that you found helpful, useful, thought that they were kind of on a good path there. Is there anything you want to share about Tennessee before we kind of move into integrated care?
No, I don't think so. I had a chance to sit in on a presentation that Kyle Bachman from an organization in Tennessee had shared their experience with setting up a lab and giving people opportunities to sort of touch and feel and experience technology, and some of the ways that they were working with their state department of intellectual disabilities on funding for that. So some grant opportunities that they took advantage of. So great. It was a great presentation, great perspective. Just like we've been saying all along, I think it's good to get as many different perspectives as possible on this and see, learn from what people are trying, and as well as sharing your own experience and what you're trying. I think those are all ways that we'll learn to kind of navigate this new space together, and improve the way we provide care and support for people and improve their independence.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Well, Jeremy, thank you again. You're welcome to hang around and listen in. I know you've got some things to do. So I appreciate you taking the time today. Anything you need from us, feedback, please always let us know. We're happy to share what we can.
Yeah, appreciate the invite. Maybe I'll just, in closing, kind of point your members back to yesterday. ODP sent out through our listservs a notification of some upcoming training, really designed and targeted towards individuals to use tech. It's a tech, My Tech for All. And so this is being coordinated and organized by Mark Freeman. And this series of 6 or 7 trainings is being funded through the DD Council. But things like, using Zoom and Facebook and email and web browsers and Alexa and smartphones and tablets. So it's kind of like a soup to nuts approach. So check that out, proliferate that out as well, get that out to as many people, get people registered. So with that, I'll bid you farewell, and I appreciate it, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Safe travels out there. Thanks for joining us today. Yep. And Craig, I do think maybe you just posted that. And so I'm going to move into the next segment. Marion, thanks for joining us. Craig, I think we've lost Steve Forrest. I just tried to reach out to him. If you don't mind, maybe seeing if he's having any difficulties jumping back in while Marion and I cover a couple of things. But yeah, if you can backtrack, Craig, I want to go to the previous slide, and welcome Marion again. So Marion, you were thanks, Craig. I know you were present last month with us, and we talked a little bit beforehand, and I mentioned earlier, we had a great panel on the integrated care solutions, and I was happy UPMC Health Plan was able to participate. And I was aware that there was still sort of a collaborative happening between Allegheny County and UPMC Health Plan, and I know that goes back many years. So I really wanted to just kind of get caught up with that. And really, I think right on site last month, we started to talk about, let's get together and see what we can do to maybe expand this to more users, more providers. So I was going to start with just seeing if you could give a little overview of what's happening. And I'll just frame it for those who aren't familiar with the topic and what we talked about last month. And my understanding of it currently is because Allegheny County does physical health participates with UPMC Health Plan, obviously has an IDD program in Allegheny County and operates and administers waivers. And Allegheny County also, because of UPMC Health Plan's presence and as a physical health provider in that space, and UPMC Health Plan also is affiliated with community care behavioral health, there's sort of this intersection of all this information. So I'll just leave it there and kind of let you talk about what's been going on recently in that collaboration.
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for inviting me, and did just want to share what it looks like from our office perspective. So in the collaboration, the agreement was signed way back in 2012. So we've had many different projects that we've done over the years, and we found it to be a very beneficial conversation. It's really the only health plan who has reached out and been so proactive in wanting to partner with us. It's been a great experience. So a few things that we've done over the years that kind of put us in the space that we're in right now. We do a regular, sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly data sharing. Under that agreement, we are able to, as two healthcare entities, we are able to share information back and forth for this collaboration. So what specific to our office, the data that we share is related to the UPMC health plan members that are already in their plan, and if they're registered with us and what that looks like. And we also, as part of that, had brought in the conversation about supporting our provider network. So part of the data share is to identify which residential providers are supporting a person. Through looking at that and talking about years ago about what that could look like, UPMC had reached out to a few of the providers that were supporting a larger number of people, and certainly to their own provider. And they had made additional agreements with those agencies to do some further work. So really, I'll summarize that, and UPMC, Matt Mucci could definitely give you a whole lot more detail, but summarize it to say that one of the benefits that we see on our end is the closing of gaps in care. And that's really an objective for UPMC also. Certainly they have deliverables as a health care organization to close gaps in care. And if anyone's not familiar with that term, if you're enrolled in a health plan and you get reminders in the mail to do your annual physical or other tests, that's the health plan trying to close gaps in care. There's recommended best practices out in the world, and their deliverable is to meet those best practices to a high percentage for all of their members. The data that I see coming back from their partnership with our three local providers is very impressive. The percentage compliance, percentage achievement of closing those gaps in care has been pretty impressive in comparison to their general population.
So Mary, let me ask you that. So when you talk about the gaps in care, are those metrics that the health plan, UPMC health plan is looking at under physical health, or do they address anything that those providers are sort of identifying as gaps for themselves?
I would say that those providers would have more knowledge to speak to that. Our involvement in that is really just to facilitate the connection and the basic data that comes from our system and their system. We certainly don't have any kind of oversight role in that. We just, we want to see the good product of both of that. So I would imagine with all three of those agencies that there are maybe different benefits that they could share individually.
Yeah. Is there anything tangible that you see for IDA providers? Like I've heard some things anecdotally. If somebody's in the hospital for a long period of time and maybe discharge planning, and maybe they need to get some DME into the house short term or something like that. Is that accurate? Are there any other things that you can kind of point to that where you see advantages for folks that live in the community?
Absolutely. Right. So we have a piece of this has been development of a connection with their care management team. So if on the back of your insurance card, if you would ever call in and say, I need some help with something, they have a care management team. They have become very knowledgeable in our system and for folks with intellectual disabilities and autism, and have participated in various educational. So we are able to tap into them. We also Previously, we're having regular roundtable meetings with them, which we had just talked about restarting again, and those would include case reviews. So we can bring a case to their attention and get their problem solving and get them very hands-on in helping us. And the same with our provider agencies.
Okay.
If a provider agency does not have that agreement already in place with them, certainly you could do that through our office. You can definitely call the care management team and identify yourself as a residential provider for persons with intellectual disability, and they would understand what you were saying. But you could also connect with them through our office in this roundtable that we do to discuss specific cases. And the other benefit of that I just want to mention is it is more specific for their membership, obviously, but they've also given us great advice about any situation that we've had from a healthcare plan perspective. So even when it's not someone that's registered, that's in their health plan, they've been able to give us advice that's been very beneficial.
Well, that's great to hear. And you really hit on it, like the care management, the care coordination, that's what I'm really curious about. Is there that function? Sounds like it definitely is. That function is there and it's happening. It's already being provided by UPMC Health Plan, correct?
That's
so
right.
This is basically the care management that they would do, but this care manager has access to information from your office, information from behavioral health. So they have a greater lens into this person's needs. And I think that's sort of what, as we kind of advance into the rest of this discussion today around selective contracting and why I think this pilot, I still call it a pilot, sorry, but why this can be so powerful is we don't really see that now. And Rose, I see your question in terms of this sort of being commercial, but this is the UPMC Health Plan, government services, HCBS. These are Medicaid plans, correct, Marianne? So everybody that's in a waiver gets to select from one of a few Medicaid physical health plans. So that's what we're speaking about here, not sort of the commercial insurance that any of us may have through our employers. This is something that is eligible to any of the recipients of the waivers currently, anybody that's enrolled. So they're selecting a physical health plan. And as it happens in Allegheny County for waiver recipients living or being served in Allegheny County, they can select UPMC Health Plan. And in any of those cases, you sort of have a window into that information. Does that sound accurate?
That's right. And you'll hear the term SNP, so special needs unit, and that is the plan that is specific to their Medicare and their collaboration with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, do you see parallels here with the PA START initiative? Is there sort of either philosophically or with some of the partnerships? Because it sounds very similar from a distance. I'm just curious, do you see those things kind of integrating?
Well, we're trying to make those connections. I'll say that obviously due to privacy reasons, the CCBHO collaboration is in a different language, in a different place. So we're trying to make those connections with the START activities and with other multi-system activities that we do. So it's kind of two parallel tracks, I would say.
Okay, we'll see where we can kind of merge them down the line if that's possible. But really appreciate your time. I think that the integrated care solutions, this is really kind of at the core of what we'd like to see happen. More information, more people in a position to help guide services and help people, and systems that would talk to one another, and hopefully to everyone's benefit. But Mary, anything you'd like to close with in terms of next steps? We have the meeting September 7th, right, with UPMC. So you and I will be there. We'll talk a little bit more about this and whether we can expand it at that time. I know, but any closing thoughts?
I'll just say anything that anyone has suggestions of anything that our office can further develop under the agreement that we have, we're more than happy to do. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Marion, thanks for joining us. And we'll talk on the 7th, if not before, and really appreciate you being with us today. So Craig, we'll move on here to our next topics, and I'll just briefly make comment on our collaboration with the PA-IDA associations. I'm going to talk a lot about this as we sort of do our run-up to selective contracting. A couple of collaborations we're in the midst of. Second bullet point, we've been talking about, I guess really for a few months now, but at the cross-association level, we've been having this conversation for the last several weeks 2023 IDA Workforce Survey. I'd like to welcome in Steve Forrest from the Center for Healthcare Solutions. And Steve, welcome. Thanks for being here today. I just wanted to kind of introduce you, talk a little bit to our members about this topic. And Craig, I'm probably going to impose on you to display on screen the survey tool that we're kind of working with now. I want to tell everyone this is draft form. So we're still having conversations among the various associations. We're hoping to get this pushed out, I would say early next week. We've been in talks with our partners. Last year, you might recall, TPA, along with the Center for Healthcare Solutions, of course, ARC of Pennsylvania, and RCPA, we collaborated on a survey, issued a report. That report actually came out early this year. I think we released it in January of 2023. It's a workforce survey that we actually kind of merged data with the other associations who had done a similar workforce survey. And throughout the course of this spring, we used composite data from both of those studies to advance the state of the workforce in our advocacy. So, Steve, I'm not sure you're there, so I'm just going to give you a call out.
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here today. So, Steve,
yeah, not a problem.
Sort of call you the architect of the forum. You reached out a couple of months ago to sort of get back on track with this. Again, this is a survey that Center for Healthcare Solutions, previously Hospital Council of Western Pennsylvania, has been doing really for decades. Have always had IDD members in their membership. Now with our collaborative, we're all treating those members the same way. Everybody has the benefits at Center for Healthcare Solutions. Services and partners. So the survey, and I see you're starting on the glossary, Craig. I'm going to maybe just ask you, Steve, to take a quick walkthrough of the survey.
Sure.
We had our HR committee, I guess, about a week or 10 days ago. And I'll say up front, one of the things we were debating was, everybody has gotten a lot of surveys over the course of the last couple of years. You've heard Jeremy talk about some others. A little bit later, you may hear me talk more about surveys that are coming as a result of selective contracting. So we're very sensitive to the fact that these take a lot of time, energy, and work on the part of you as members. But it's very critical data. So to that point, we sort of considered, should we just scale back the scope of the survey to more or less DSP, direct care and support positions, and sort of not deal with management positions and other positions. So we asked our HR committee to weigh in on that, and not everybody in the group voted on it, but of those who did, it was unanimous. We'd rather have the full survey. I know we've heard from members in the past about wage compression issues. It's really important for you to sort of survey yourselves against other organizations and other benchmarks in terms of what does increasing wage do for you and your organization with frontline supervisors and managers. So we've made the decision at this point, we've made that recommendation across all the other associations that we think we want to go with the full survey. So that's what this is. This is what's on the table that we'll hopefully get sign off on and release this next week. But Steve, I really will turn it over to you now to just kind of walk through these tabs very briefly with us and show us what we have.
Sure thing. Good morning, everybody. As Patrick mentioned, I'm Steve Forrest with the Center for Healthcare Solutions. I call myself the head data nerd there, and so I'm one of the analysts and work on the HR side of the compensation surveys. And as Patrick had mentioned, this is a survey that's kind of getting a snapshot of what wages and some pay practices are for within the IDA industry. And so this is a tab, this is an input form that we have folks fill out. It's very similar to the ones that participated last year. We did add some things like the glossary just to kind of clarify things. So I'm not sure who's controlling the screen, but Patrick, if you can click on the next one, the position description, this just provides a general description for the positions that are actually on the input form. These are general, they're kind of specific without being too specific. So we can't have an exact job description for folks necessarily, because we have to try to be all things to all different kinds of facilities. So these are just kind of general job descriptions where we break them down by position category. And then if you look at the input form part 1, this is where the magic happens, where folks actually have to enter the data. So you can see we're collecting multiple, we have, I think, 46 positions or 43, I forgot the exact number. 46, okay, good. We're asking for how many positions are scheduled, how many are actually filled, and this helps us do turnover and occupation occupancy calculations. We also are asking for what you're actually paying people. If it's a single person, obviously that reflects one salary. If it's a group of people, it's an average of their salaries. But this allows us to slice and dice the data and give you a range from, what's the 10th percentile paying all the way up to the 90th percentile with an average and the median and all those fun things. We can also slice it by region if we have enough participants. So it really gives the members a nice nuanced view of what's happening in Pennsylvania. With a lot of wage surveys, they're more national or regional. And if you everybody living in Pennsylvania, if you've traveled across the state, that cost of living in Pittsburgh is vastly different than Philadelphia. And the nice thing about a survey like this is it gets that nuance of like, okay, well, this is what wages are in the Southeast versus Northwest of Pennsylvania, to help you with budgeting, with planning, with wage negotiations. And then on the part 2, Patrick, if you can click on that, please. This is a little different from last year. Last year, we just asked for all positions some very broad pay practices. Do you offer, financial rewards or incentives based upon tenure or credentialing? Do you have collective bargaining units and so forth? And we just asked that among all positions. This year, we're actually kind of trying to drill down a little bit more so we can kind of get it on a position by position basis, because you may find that there's only a certain classification of positions that you offer financial incentives for credentialing, for example. And this again gives the end user more information for when they're planning for their budgeting. Maybe they only want to hire, folks that have credentialing, and this kind of gives you a little bit more nuanced look on that. So that's kind of the general idea of this. It usually takes folks, a day or two to fill this out because they're, kind of slotting this in with all their other responsibilities. But we try to give folks 3 to 4 weeks to fill this out. And then we're always trying to be accommodating as we can with folks who need extra time. We'll get the data back, clean it together, extract it, put it into a report, send it to the advisory committee that Patrick has together to kind of review, make sure everything looks good. And then we distribute that as a final report for all those who submitted.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I'll call out as we go through this form. One of the things you'll see is data due by September 1st. We're looking at
you can ignore that.
Obviously. Yeah, so we're right now talking, and we've shared this, with our partners. I believe we would probably look at ideally being able to make decision on release early next week. Give everybody until September 22nd to submit data. That would be a couple of Fridays out. And we still think, Steve, I'm correct. I think you wrote me back this morning. Probably could still issue a report in early October. Correct. That would be published and sent out to everybody. So that's the current goal. Kind of align on that. Craig,
and sorry, Patrick, there is a question somebody asked.
Sure.
It looks like Carrie, for agencies that are in multiple regions, is the goal of the survey being described to focus on the specific data and positions in the Southwest section of the region only?
Yeah,
we're looking for.
I'll
okay.
comment on that, Steve. So first of all, notwithstanding your comments about generally speaking, you're doing surveys, and I know you do this for hospitals and various other industries. So for us right now, we're working off a statewide fee schedule. So I think the variability, and I think this has been proven out in other surveys, is that there's not as much variability as you might expect, because everybody's getting the same reimbursement for services. And it's really sort of, by design, if I go back and tell a history story. But for right now, that's where we are. I think legitimate reasons to pay competitively because of what you just described, I think that is a very real policy issue. Carrie, to your question and point, I got to go back. I'm sorry, your question specifically. But no, we don't want to focus on Southwest only. We want to get data. We have, as you know, if you're on the call, members from across the state. We want this to be very fulsome, representative of every region across the state. That's why we feel it's so important that we do a single survey, if at all possible. So that's why we're having that conversation with all of the other associations. So multiple regions represented by multiple associations. We're hopeful that we can get as much data as possible in this survey, because the next thing, and I think I see a question about Kristen. Any hope, feedback from Kristen, she might use the very powerful data for the next rate to refresh. Yes, so exactly the point there. I've talked to Kristen, and she actually provided some criticism to me that was constructive in terms of the ability to see a published report. So I first want to say that's a loop we've closed with Steve and Center for Healthcare Solutions. If you recall the rules of the survey last year, you got a full report if you participated in the survey. And this is not unlike what TPA used to do years ago when through the HR work group, TPA would do surveys of membership on wage, compensation, benefits. And that was always the rule. We kind of expanded that for TPA surveys, but we went with that last year, and that was one of the topics Kristen raised. And she said for ODP to really be able to take this data and use it and know that it's credible, they have to be able to see a full published report. So we've talked about that among our partners across the associations. We've talked with Steve and Center for Healthcare Solutions about it. And Steve, correct me where I'm wrong here, but I think you basically said, well, this is really your survey. So however you want to set the rules, go ahead and do that. We were already talking about we needed something public facing, we needed an executive summary, we needed something published, signed off on by Center for Healthcare Solutions, identifying the sample set, identifying all the rules, identifying all the questions, so that Kristen or anybody at ODP or the state could look at this and size it up as a credible survey. So we believe it is just that. So we want to make sure we give them whatever they need. And I'll get to the rate update portion of your question. I guess this is Bill, I'm sorry, that you just spoke to. I'm going to address that specifically coming up here in a few moments. So I'll stop there for any questions specific to the tool. Craig, if you can open the poll on IDA workforce survey. One of the things I'm interested in learning from members present today, whether you think a workshop to sit down with Steve, we probably open this up to anybody that was going to participate. Again, we're hopeful we'll do a joint release, everybody on the same dates to work with. But to the extent, and we did this last year, so it was the first time we were using this tool, so definitely beneficial. In some cases, if you're the person doing this or you think this would be helpful for your organization, ultimately at the end of the day, we want to see as many members do this as possible. This is why I'm calling it out in advance. This is going to be out before we have a chance to meet again. Of course, we'll be putting it out in our communications, but I want to just make sure to give it a call out and emphasize it now. I'm hopeful that it'll come out in the next few days. And when it does, we want you to begin to work on it. So I think you can see the results, Steve. Maybe you can't, I can. It looks like we got about 85% yes so far coming in on yes to a workshop. We would want to do that early in the process. So maybe even as we release, we'll try to collaborate, pick a date that works for everybody. And again, encourage you as members to kind of fill this out, get it back to us, because it will be foundational in what we do for the remainder of this year into next year's budget cycle and season. And hopefully prior to that, in our advocacy for a rate update as soon as possible. So I'll get to that topic in a moment. Craig, do we have a Q&A that needs to be addressed?
We do. There is a question. Does the survey account for overall budget size? For example, very large providers are able to pay more for directors and managers compared to smaller providers.
Yeah, I literally don't recall the answer to that, Steve. So I'll defer to you.
The answer is no, but it's something we could certainly factor in. So in order to know that, we would need to know. We would have to have folks submit, kind of like categories of what your annual budget falls under. Sure. If I'm reading the question right.
Yeah, I would tell you it's an implication of the survey because it gets us to the question of weighting. So if you're a large organization, that is in fact the case, and you're reporting an average wage of X, you may have hundreds more employees than somebody that reports an average age of Y or average wage of Y. So we know it's an implication. I would say it's not going to get into the survey, would be my opinion. I know we take that kind of data when we do our broader TPA poll, which I don't think we've actually done. We skipped a year on that just again because there have been so many surveys we've asked you to complete. But we always like to look at profile of membership in terms of that kind of data. We haven't related wage to that kind of data. Honestly, we haven't used it that way in advocacy either. So it's something, as Steve says, we can note, again, as we're trying to broaden this and do this as a collaborative, we have to make sure that everybody kind of weighs in on that. We appreciate your feedback and input. I encourage you to write us that information, come to the workshop, say that then. It's probably going to need to be in the next iteration because this is one of the time-sensitive issues that we're trying to tackle here.
And actually, Becky, I just wanted to add on. So the reason why, or there's a little bit more to it than just being able to ask for it. So there's the safe harbor guide. I don't want to get too deep into it because that can be the next thing. But basically, the federal government has these things called safe harbor guidelines that help prevent against collusion. And one of the criteria is when you use a weighted metric where you're doing like a weighted average based upon the number of employees an employer hires, you aren't able to report it out if they account for more than, I think, 25% of all reported positions, which means if you have like one big player, if you do a weighted average, you can't actually report the data if you don't have enough people, and if the big player accounts for too much. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, Steve, I'm glad you bring it up, because really, again, because I'm glad we're using a partner like you, because I've learned a lot about embargoing of the data, the Department of Justice rules, antitrust. This gets at a lot of price fixing that really doesn't apply to us, but these rules exist for a reason. And I can tell you that if TPA was doing the survey 5 years ago, we wouldn't know any of that. And I appreciate that you guys are doing it on our behalf, hopefully on behalf of the whole system, so that we know all those rules are followed. So as you may have noted this, Steve, but that's why the data has to be as of, I think you have June 30th, that has to be 90 days before they can publish a report on the data. So the data has to be at least 90 days old. So just another rule. But yeah, Steve, like you, I don't want to get into the weeds on it too much either, other than to say, glad you guys know the rules and can guide us in terms of the types of questions and what gets published into the report. So I am going to stop there. We want to cover a lot more information here that really kind of launches us into a lot of the questions that we've already hit on this subject. So Steve, thank you so much for being here today. We'll be in touch with you. Myself, all the partners across the other associations, we know this is a priority. We know this is time sensitive. We'll be making decisions on this, I'm sure, in the next few days. And then for all of you members out there, you can be looking, waiting to see in your inboxes the release of this information. And again, I'm expecting that September 22nd will be a date we'll be asking everybody to submit their data. We've tried to make the tool user-friendly. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet. You fill the data out and send it to Steve, and you're done. But we know there's a lot of work involved, so we'll get the workshop set up as well. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, Craig, I think we can move on here to close out the rest of our agenda. So in terms of collaboration, that's one of the agenda items that we wanted to tackle. And I've already mentioned a support letter with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, letter we've all submitted to the governor. And Craig, if we haven't done so already, maybe I can just ask you to place in the chat what we kind of identified as our meeting handouts. One of them is this letter that I'm about to go through that we jointly sent to Kristen Ahrens yesterday. As you can see on the slide, subject request to immediately initiate fee schedule rate update. So this was agreed upon. We've been talking about this letter for a couple of weeks. We settled on this concept, I would say quite a while back. I think that as I go through the letter, I think some of that will become somewhat evident. But you have a copy of the full letter. We'll make sure that we do distribute this out to full TPA membership and our mailing list. I can tell you up front, Kristen is aware of the letter and knew the letter was coming. We've been having conversations about exactly what I'll kind of lay out here that we believe is a foundational strategy in terms of investment in fee schedule rates. So if you can go next slide, Craig, I'm going to go through this letter. It's really not a very flowery letter. It is something that we just intended to make a request for very specifically and lay out some reasons and some data to kind of support it. So, as you can note here, we're writing to request an independent evaluation to update the data used to develop ODP's fee schedule rates in accordance with Chapter 6100-571. We're asking that this be initiated immediately. And then we get into why is this an urgent request and why are we asking for it now? So actually, again, I'll reference our conference last month. One of the questions Kristen received was, how long will it take for data to be updated by Mercer or whomever? They don't necessarily have to use Mercer. And the answer was 90 days. And that's consistent with what I think we have heard in the past. I don't know if it's entirely consistent with what we've experienced. Some of you out there have served on some of the rate work group committees, but 90 days is, we know that it's going to take at least 90 days, and we know we're in August. So the reason we lay this out to be urgent and why we cite the 90 days is because, as we say in the letter, this analysis will require 90 days to complete, and recognition that a substantial investment in rates will require credible data and analysis to be provided to the Commonwealth Budget Office in advance of the governor's next executive budget. So we know by the second Tuesday in February of 2024, Governor Shapiro will announce his new budget, and there either will or there won't be money in it for IDA fee schedule rates. And if there's not an analysis done now, then there's really no way the budget office is going to have credible information. And what that's going to mean is we will be picking the number and saying, this is how much we need. And while we feel pretty capable of doing that, it's not the same as having the state's own contracted actuary perform an analysis. And I'll get into some of the details later. I'll just sort of placehold that for now to say, right now, that is the goal. That's the reasoning behind it. Last sentence really addresses transparency. We asked that a stakeholder committee representing individuals served by the community IDA system, their families, and provider organizations be afforded the opportunity to actively participate in the rate review process and be advised on all recommendations prior to the publication of any proposed rates. So reasoning thinking there is, I think, as most are aware, committee was formed last time, rates were published, but most people who served on the committee, I think, would tell us that a lot of what ended up in the rates, they were not fully informed on. We want to make sure that as decisions are being made, and certainly before proposed rates are published, that there is stakeholder input on some of the issues that affect where those rates would land. Next slide, please, Craig, and I'll get into the second paragraph of the letter and explain a little bit here. So current fee schedule rates adopted effective January 1st, 2022 relied upon published wage data from the U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics as of May 2020. To update this data from May 2020 to January 2022, wage data was trended by 3.5%. So, this is something we've said consistently, pretty much from the point in time when the rates were published as proposed on New Year's Eve 2021, they were enacted effective January 1st. And that took about 6 weeks to actually publish them as final. In the meantime, we had access to a report prepared by Mercer Consulting, prepared for ODP by Mercer Consulting. So I didn't extract these paragraphs from the report, but you can certainly check them out. Greg, I think we have the full report posted somewhere on the website, but I can just tell you that the language in the report is very explicit that they did exactly this. I don't think there's any ambiguity. They actually cite the date, January 1st, 2022, as what they trended to. And we feel very confident in saying that beyond that, there is no inflation embedded into the fee schedule rates currently. So that's the reason for the statement, no further adjustment to account for future inflation was incorporated into fee schedule rates. Now we're looking at current inflation. So it's August of 2023, about middle of the month, inflation gets published for the previous month. So we have data through July 2023. And we know that if you go back to May 2020, the date that's cited by ODP through Mercer in the Mercer report, that inflation, and we give historical tables, US City Average, Mid-Atlantic Information Office, you can go right to the BLS Department of Labor website, and you can find this information. But the table will give you the values that they calculate inflation by, and you can run the numbers, and we've calculated it and included it in this letter as 19.23%. So even if you say that they did a trending of 3.5%, argument has been for months that we're at double-digit inflation behind on fee schedule rates. So the references are in the letter. So that kind of concludes paragraph 2 of the letter. Next paragraph, we kind of reflect on what just happened with the PA budget. So given the $170 million in state funding recently reduced from the governor's original budget proposed in March 2023, and the continuing struggles of service providers and families to hire and retain qualified direct support professionals in the current economic environment, we are concerned that the Commonwealth will continue to spend less on services and that the IDA community will remain at risk for further reductions in funding. At Pennsylvania's current federal medical assistance percentage, FMAP, of 54%, $170 million in state dollars translates to $370 million in total funding that would otherwise be available to fund services at higher reimbursement rates. So without using the term underutilization, this is really what we're talking about. So we're talking about the issue of the state has a budget, the fee schedule rates are what they are, inflation has far outstripped the economy all around us, and people are getting fewer services and the state is spending less. And as a result of that, somebody looked at this in the government and said, there's a surplus here that we feel we can reclaim back into the general fund. So we want to frame this issue out as, we understand that's why it happened. We are concerned it will continue to happen unless this money is invested into our fee schedule rates. Final paragraph. We are confident that Mercer Consulting or any credible actuary will conclude that current ODP fee schedule rates are substantially below inflation. Without a competitively compensated workforce to restore service capacity, underspending on services will continue. For these reasons, we further believe that a significant portion of the funding needed for this critical investment may already be available within the Community Waiver Program's line item appropriation for fiscal year 23-24. This would enable new rates to be implemented in the current fiscal year and request that after conducting the rate analysis, that ODP adopt updated fee schedule rates at the earliest possible effective date. So while we are talking about making sure that the budget office and the governor's office are both prepared with data that will identify how far behind our rates are in inflation, we are also citing the possibility, because of what the state just clawed back from our previous line item allocation, that there could be funding available immediately to fund new fee schedule rates. So we wanted to call that out in a very clear way. Hopefully it'll be clear to the readers of the letter. And if you go next slide, Craig, that's really just simply the demonstration of the collaboration and the unification and the unified effort and the joint work that we're all doing across these 6 associations. So of course, we thank Kristen for her consideration. We offered the opportunity to meet and discuss. And as I can tell you, and I'm sure others, other signers that you're seeing on the screen before you have had similar conversations. I know that I've spoken to Kristen about the exact concept. I've let her know we're working on a letter. We expect that we will put this to you in writing. And I think it is a critical first step to make sure that we can frame out the need and the proper amount for investment that can translate into something that actually gets into reimbursement for families, individuals receiving services in the provider community. So I'll stop there for a moment. I know we want to get into selective contracting discussion. So I wanted to make sure that we framed this out. So Craig, if there's any questions, I'll just tackle them now. And otherwise, I want to make sure we have enough time to kind of close out with selective contracting.
No questions, just a comment. Thank you, Patrick, for your leadership in getting the other associations to sign this letter. It's a great example of the respect the IDA Association has for you and for TPA. So thanks.
Well, thanks for that. I do need to say it's really a collaborative effort. This letter doesn't get done without all of us sitting at the table and working together. I do appreciate the comments. I think that applies to probably everybody here. It takes all of us to get together, to come together, to send this message, to really say that we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder and advance it. And we need all of you as well in membership to help us do that. So we feel it's a critical first step so that we have something to rally around. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the comments. Again, you'll hear us refer back to this, and we will certainly give you updates periodically on progress on this. We're hopeful we'll be able to get movement on actually initiating the rate review as soon as possible. So thanks again, everyone. I think we'll need to move on here, Craig, because I definitely want to make sure we cover a few things from the Isaac. So Craig, again, I'll compliment you because you did a really great review and overview of the Isaac committee meeting that occurred on the 15th. There's actually a provider oversight meeting that happens on the 14th. We learned some interesting information, some things about enterprise case management, some things about some incident management data. There were actually some announcements about selective contracting that I'll cover in a moment. But there was, this is just how we put this out on the agenda. We can just move to next slide, Craig, and we'll kind of get right into the Isaac updates. So Craig, again, you had put this out really kind of right after the Isaac, and I wanted to certainly honor and make mention of the tribute paid to Carolyn Morgan from SAU1, and I really didn't know Carolyn. I know some members, attended her funeral back in May. Really an icon in this world, and I thought this was a great write-up talking about Carolyn Morgan, and this was something that Craig put together, and earlier this year. When she had passed, I know that TPA put out a tribute. And again, I want to say Craig was able to pull that together, and we did something at that time as well. But just briefly, the committee paid tribute to Carolyn Morgan. Self Advocates United is one. When Carolyn was young, her mother planned to send Carolyn to an institution because people told her mother it would be best. Then her mom heard about someone dying in the institution and changed her mind and history. Carolyn spoke for herself and others and had for over 50 years. She's paved the way for people with disabilities through her life by example, by advocating for the rights of all people, and by teaching others about their rights and how to speak for those rights. We want the same things everyone wants, our rights as human beings and individuals to live everyday lives of our choice. I tell people you can live the life you want, speak up in your way, have people you trust in your life to support you. So I thought those words said a lot. It's a very emotional tribute that was offered up by many people from SAU1. Many Isaac members as well, including Kristen, really spoke so highly of Carolyn. I wanted to make sure that we started any review of the Isaac meeting with that tribute. So one critical thing that I do want to call out, this is also somewhat reflective of the letter that we just reviewed to Kristen. When you think in terms of underspending, underutilization, ODP on August the 4th did issue a new announcement. And Kristen actually covered this information with us last month at the TPA meeting during our conference. So these were previously some much lower amounts and previously some much higher thresholds to meet to qualify for these amounts. So actually to qualify for the lesser amount. So as you can see on the bottom line, providers achieving under 50% of pre-pandemic capacity now receive a payment. So you really don't have to meet any criteria to get a payment. So we want to call that out. And if you go next slide, Craig, I think I just sort of referenced maybe the language in the, again, the announcement was August the 4th of 2023, but I want to call out, you have to apply for this. So the funding has to be applied for through a form that's part of this announcement. I believe you have till September 30th. It probably says here, it's probably why I use this information. Yeah, submit this form to Rick Smith by September 30th. So the form is with the announcement. This is, everyone does qualify. So if you're doing CPS at all, any of those recoveries, so take a look at this full document. And I think we have it as a handout. Make sure you fill out the form, because if you don't fill out the form, you're not going to qualify to get this. And again, we've talked about underspending. I just want to emphasize that that is state general funds. This is federal ARPA money. So this is totally federal money that likewise was not spent. And in this case, it's just sort of being divvied up among the provider community. So they've raised the number and amount. They've certainly opened the pool of qualified candidates for which you can apply, but you do have to apply. So we want to make sure that we call that out and make sure that you all do fill out the form on this announcement and do submit that to Rick Smith on time. So we can move on, Craig, into some of the more specific things that were covered. So I'm only going to show a couple of the slides from the Isaac. And at this point, I want to invite Nancy Murray in. So we'll get to this full group of TPA participants who are on these residential strategic thinking group. Nancy is one of them. A couple of months ago, we had sort of a full panel discussion with this group of people, and they're very busy doing this work. So I don't want to impose on people who are serving on the committee that are actually making these decisions, collaborating among one another and working with folks from ODP and their contractors. But I did want to catch everybody up on decisions that have been made. So these are a couple of things that Kristen covered last week at the Isaac, selective contracting concept paper, public comment. She actually covered a lot of this at our session in July. So the meetings have been scheduled through September, which is good. They continue to meet. Originally, there were about 4 meetings scheduled. I think it's been, really kind of aggressive schedule. A lot of people have continued to meet who are represented on the committee, representing all types of providers from the provider community, family members, administrative entities. So the intent certainly has been to make sure that this is a very representative group from the IDA community. The proposed waiver and waiver amendments for public comment. So, that's all underway. And I think, as I'll probably reference, a slide or two down the line here, the foundational things here really get to having a new type of waiver approved so that the state can indeed implement selective contracting. So next slide has really the main takeaways and I guess the main decisions that have been made. So the timeline has been adjusted. So you may have heard this already. I guess it's been known now for, going on about 10 days. So the original implementation date for residential services for selective contracting was July 1st, 2024. So they've pushed that back 6 months. I think we all sort of perceived that as a very aggressive timeline. We were actually trying to leverage that date to say, well, then you need to have rates in place by then, certainly, if you're going to implement rate tiers and pay for performance. So even though that's off the table, we still know there's urgency. 6 months and likely longer could be necessary to really get this ready to go. But that is one issue. The second bullet point gets to, several members have asked me this question, preferred tiers, how many of the services you need to provide. ODP came out of the gate saying to be preferred, it was pretty firm on you had to offer all of these particular services or you would not qualify. And to those who asked me the question since then, I told people I sensed that ODP was softening on this position. I think there was some of that language shared by Kristen at our meeting. And indeed, they're now saying that the preferred tier, first of all, 2 paths to obtain preferred status, 2 of 3 services provided during the review period, and to meet the clinically enhanced standards. So there's a lot of detail that I don't want to even try to go into. These are the discussions being had, and this is how this was presented to the Isaac stakeholder group. So workforce, there was a requirement to have folks conducting life sharing or being supported in life sharing for the staff to be credentialed. And I think Kristen put it very bluntly. They realized that wasn't a great idea. There was no need to credential those staff that were involved in a life sharing arrangement. So they're removing that requirement. And adding frontline supervisors added to the turnover standards. I'm not exactly clear on the detail on that, but there was discussion around the fact that they couldn't ignore data and the importance of frontline supervisors. So good detail to be included. Details added to standards, measures, and tiers, name change for data analytics. There was some, I think, confusion over, was this commercial managed care versus somebody performing functions in the back office to support selective contracting? So a name change, added performance standards, community integration, participant involvement in advisory and/or boards, social justice, cultural competency, and wellness activities. And the final thing that I want to say there is the slides that I did not include from the Isaac are the slides as to how many responses they got on all of these issues. And what typically will happen in this environment is everything that gets missed gets compiled and tallied as how many people brought this or that up. And I think there is a risk that that will kind of make everything much more bulky going forward. It's one of the reasons, reflecting back on integrated care, I think we want to be very focused and judicious on what we recommend gets into selective contracting, because it could be a very long list. And I use the reference to the Everyday Lives annual report. And I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at it. I was going to have Craig kind of push it out. I know we've had it distributed. I think it just became final, but it's a very lengthy document. And as such, I think that it becomes more lengthy as we talk about it more and add more criteria. So while these things are reported out, I'm not saying these aren't good additions and we shouldn't have these integrated into our care and services, but we do want to be careful not to add too much into all these various standards. So Craig, if you can go next slide, I just kind of want to see what I have up. I think at some point I have a slide with the names, and Nancy, you're on this list. So I want to welcome you in, Nancy, because unfortunately we don't have a lot of time to discuss this. I've talked to a few more people on this list. A few people had conflicts and were going to join us, and we're not able to have this discussion today. But we have Nancy, who serves on this committee, and I just thought you might be able to kind of give your perspective on the most recent announcements coming out of Isaac and anything else that you're able to talk about, Nancy. So thanks for joining us and welcome.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I just want to give everybody a glimpse as to what happens kind of behind the scenes. The larger group is divided into small work groups, and each work group has really good representation. Providers from rural, urban areas, small providers, large providers, providers who support people with complex behavioral and medical needs, and others that don't. So each time we meet, I have to say we really have very, very robust discussions on each performance standard. For example, at our last meeting, my small group spent 1 hour and 5 minutes just talking about the performance standards to be able to support people with complex needs. And on almost every performance standard, we are mentioning the workforce shortage, and we're also talking about and how that's really a barrier to what ODP might like to see. And we're also we're mentioning the fact that there cannot be a duplication of regulations, that this might be a time to actually simplify some parts of the system. And we really think that in some ways, ODP, Kristen, is listening. For example, during our first meeting, that's when we, and almost everybody in the group said that there was just no way that this could happen by July 1st of 2024. So then, as you know, it's been pushed back to January 1st of 2025. We also, that first meeting, had a really good discussion about providers not not being required to provide all three types of residential services, that would only lead to the loss of some providers who provide very, very niche services. Now, we did not have time the last meeting to address the 4 new performance standards, the wellness, ensuring that people with disabilities are on boards and committees. But we do have a meeting next Tuesday. It's an all-day meeting in Harrisburg. And as Patrick just said, I really invite all TPA members to get in touch with those of us on the Residential Strategic Thinking Group, or send Patrick information directly. If there is something that you feel really, should not happen or could not happen in a different way, please get us that information so that we can take it to our meetings with ODP, because we may not be able to change their minds on everything, but I think so far we've done okay changing their minds on some pretty important parts of this. So thanks, Patrick.
No, thanks for the insights as well, Nancy. And I'll mention what we have on screen before we leave this slide is, and this isn't the full group. These are people who are TPA members, I think almost exclusively. I have one person there I can see. I'll call a friend and colleague of TPA. There are other people you may be familiar with who are on that. I concur and echo what Nancy says. Get information to them. You can certainly always communicate to ODP directly, communicate to me and Craig, and we'll pass that along as well. We want to make sure that we're really giving you the opportunity to speak out. Craig, I'll have you go just the next couple of slides. Really they kind of frame where ODP came from on this. So this isn't new information. We're kind of reflecting back, and I thought it was important to kind of show. I don't think there are changes here, and maybe you can weigh in, Nancy, too. I think that what ODP's intent has not changed. I think they're moving towards this. I think they are listening, as you say, and they will listen, because it's pretty clear to me that, unlike maybe in some historical examples where we kind of feel like we know ODP is doing this, they're going to put a committee together. I don't get that sense. I think that there isn't a model. I think this came out similarly when Jeremy was talking about tech. There isn't a directive from CMS that agencies should doing HCBS for IDD folks should be moving in this direction. So this is something that ODP is genuinely trying to learn what will work across its provider system and across its IDA community. So I think there is a real opportunity to advance that. So before I forget to do this, I'm going to ask Craig to open kind of our final poll. One of the things that we sort of have in parallel with this, a dual conversation, I hear from members on this, on both sides of it. This is all ODP policy, but we kind of want to hear from you on policy decisions. What's most important to you? Is your readiness to do any form of a new system, a new model of care, managed care? Does one outweigh the other? And the reason we kind of have it as a 3 opportunity response is, we know some of you have gone through managed care conversions in other worlds. Many of you haven't. And what we do at TPA is really, although we know you provide other services such as behavioral health and other community services and various other things, we really focus on the IDA mission in Pennsylvania. So, we know that there are people that are sort of craving some resources and some preparedness because they recognize things within their own organization are not where they would like them to be, and they feel that their own preparation, regardless of system and ODP policy, is more important than what is ODP saying. So, we kind of give you the opportunity to say if you value those equally, but this will probably lead us in a direction of what we want to do next to help members really get prepared on both of these fronts. So with that, we'll let you kind of weigh in on the poll. We'll certainly take those results, not necessarily to sort of share here's where everybody stands. We're happy to do that, but again, so that we can kind of construct something going forward that is most useful for you. So Nancy, I'll kind of bounce back to you. Anything that, I've had this slide up, these are the areas, they want to change the way providers are enrolled, qualified, and paid through these services. So maybe more importantly, Craig, next slide, this is kind of specifically how they said they want to do that. And this allows ODP to improve the quality of these services by moving beyond contracting with any willing and qualified provider, developing a class of preferred providers, and aligning payment with outcomes. So, not the full document, but of course, the things that I thought, we should call out. These seem to be the themes and principles that they're still abiding by. So, Nancy, do you agree, disagree there? Is there more to it than what I'm suggesting?
No, I think that's the work ahead of us, but so far to date, we've really been working on that second bullet point, developing the standards for the preferred providers. The other thing that probably should be mentioned is a lot of decisions have yet to be made because ODP does not have the data that they're going to need. So, for example, there's a list of things that they're going to need baseline data on, for example, with risk management, employment, use of remote supports. So we can't make progress in some areas without some of that data.
Yeah, there will be a survey coming out. I should have already said that. I know that Kristen has sort of alerted everyone. They're going to need to collect that data. So again, more information that unfortunately we need to rely upon you, and we know that takes work and time. So I know that we caught one question I saw pop in, discussion about tiers, about enhanced payment for upper tiers. I'll let you answer that, Nancy, but I'll say first that I know that in our comments from TPA, first of all, that's my understanding that that's the intent. Second of all, our emphasis was that even lower tiers, we have to make sure that they have sufficient funding to pay for a DSP workforce. So enhancements are fine, but lower tiers should not suffer. That's sort of a position we've taken. But any more discussion on what the differential might look like for tiers, Nancy, or is that still down the road?
That's still mostly under discussion, although Kristen has made the point quite a few times that when this is when we begin this January of 2025, all current providers in good standing will still be providers. Changes will occur after that, but no provider would not be allowed to continue to provide services on January 1st of 2025 as long as they're in good standing.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, Nancy, to provide the updates. A couple of minutes past the bottom of the hour. Thanks everybody for hanging on. Karen, I did see your note. We'll circle back to that. Craig, if there's any time, if you want to go to the last slide, please, Craig. And if there's any time to even show poll results, we'll certainly distribute those with the recording of the meeting with all the handouts that we have. But thank you all for being here today. I don't think it's too early to wish folks a happy Labor Day. Enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. If you have any needs for information or anything else, please reach out to us. Thanks, everyone.